Hey everybody, it's Randy from Ram Mock Guitars. Welcome to the third episode of Guitars in the Wild, where we build a guitar and a ukulele in the wild. I'm out here in the Appalachian Mountains and, well, I'm bullshitting you, I'm in my backyard. I wasn't able to go camping this month, summer was crazy, and I had 2 camping trips. Both times it rained, and wood, rain, they kind of sort of don't mix well together. If you're gonna build an acoustic guitar, there's a lot of steps that you have to take. So this is a good episode to kind of sort of get all that stuff out of the way. We're gonna, like I said, do the molds. We're gonna bend the sides. We're gonna make a bending iron. We're gonna do some kerfing. And I think you're gonna like the way everything turns out. We're also gonna do some work on the fretboard, so stick around. So one of the first things you're going to have to do when you want to make an acoustic guitar is you're going to have to make a mold. There's a bunch of different designs and a bunch of different ways of doing it. I decided to go with 2 different variations because I wanted to test out what I wanted to do. Now I knew that I wanted to do the better variation with the ukulele because I'm probably not going to build more molds for this. I'm probably not going to be motivated to do that, even though I do think I am going to wind up building more ukuleles down the road. So I took a little bit of time and I made this type, which I call the coffin type, because that's what it looks like. This one works out really well. The clasp could have been better, so I'll probably upgrade it once I'm done with this build. But this actually turns out to be a really good design. And I think if you're looking for a permanent sort of mold, this is the way to go. On this one, I kind of sort of went with this style, which is kind of sort of more of a skeletal type thing. And while this design worked out okay, I think the other one worked out a bit better. It just felt a little bit more sturdy. While I'm sure I could have done a better job at building this one, I think if I was going to put that much extra effort into it, I would just go with the previous coffin type. It's worth putting a lot of effort into making these as good as you can. You have to make sure that the walls are going to remain parallel so that you don't have warped sides. So anyway, after we were done with the molds, we were ready to get down to the thinning of the sides. So I have a confession to make. I'm not the best person with hand tools. I'm not really good at sharpening them yet. It's a skill that I'm still trying to refine. And so I went into this part of the build very nervously. I was afraid of actually destroying these sides, and they're so delicate at this point. They're already so thin. With a drum sander, I could have made very quick work of this, but I'm glad I don't have one. Ultimately, what I'm finding about building an acoustic is it's a really enjoyable process. All these things, you gravitate towards hand tools, you gravitate towards doing things the slow way. And it's really the pleasure of woodworking. And I don't consider myself a woodworker, to be honest with you. I consider myself a guitar maker. Wood just happens to be the medium that the guitars are made out of. But at the end of the day, it's actually really enjoyable. With my electrics, I find myself motivated to upgrade my power tools, routing table and all that other stuff. Whereas with this, I find myself motivated to upgrade my hand tool game. So I actually bought a new planer after this and some new sharpening stones, and I really plan to up my game as far as being able to use hand tools. Now, I wasn't sure how thin I should go with these, but I went down to about 2 millimeters each. Something between 1.8 and 2.4 millimeters is what they talk about. So basically I went down to between 2 and 2.2 millimeters. I should have gone thinner. So with the sides all thinned out, we were ready to do the hardest part of an acoustic guitar build, which is basically bending the sides. It's the part that everyone sort of dreads. And to do that, you're going to have to get some sort of hot iron, a bending iron. There's a bunch of different plans online, and I kind of sort of took a Frankenstein approach and made my own. So let me introduce you to what I like to call the dual induction lateral deformation object. I don't know why I called it that, it just kind of sort of fit. It's a bit of a mouthful, so maybe an acronym would help. Anyway, the way this works is kind of sort of interesting. I got some of these ideas from people on YouTube. I looked at a whole bunch of videos of people who have made their own bending irons. And one of the first things you'll notice is that this one works sideways. And the reason why I wanted it lateral is because I saw this guy, and I wish I had got his name and I'd saved the video, but he was using a hairdryer to bend wood, one of those curling irons, and he was basically clamping it onto his table, and he would just kind of sort of bend it this way. And I'm like, that seems like a really convenient way to work. So I went with this lateral sort of configuration. The actual heating element is a charcoal burner off of Home Depot. I think it cost me like 20 bucks. And then we have a voltage regulator here with a box. And I think this is kind of cool because this gets really hot and I want to be able to keep the temperature at a point where I'm not scorching the wood too much. Then last, it's just a steel tube. And on the inside, I just put and filled it with a lot of aluminum foil. I have to say, it actually performs exactly the way you would want it to. It did the job. So the Paduk ended up bending very easily. I could have gone a little bit thinner, I think, in thinning these boards, but the Paduk really wanted to bend very nicely. The Sapelli gave me a hard time, a real hard time actually. And maybe that's because the ukulele is just tighter curves, making it a little bit more difficult. But I can tell you this was a really, really enjoyable process. It's a lot of fun working on acoustics. There's just, maybe it's because it's different, maybe because it's new, but I actually had a lot of fun doing this. The only advice I have as a newbie is take your time. It'll get there, and when you're done and it's in the molds, it's really satisfying. So once the sides were bent and they were in their molds, the next thing to work on was the kerfing. What kerfing is basically this thin piece of wood that's got all these slots cut into it. And because of that, it becomes very bendy and flexible. So I started prepping the sides for the kerfing, and I've got to say, be very careful when you're working on this stuff. The sides are so thin, and they really can sort of want to tear out. So you have to be really delicate, really careful. But I managed to get most of the burn marks off. There weren't too many scorch marks. And then I was able to start the kerfing. I really enjoyed this part of the build. I think it's because it's the first time you start to feel that you actually have a guitar-shaped thing coming together. And I also thought the contrast between the light and the dark woods was actually really, really cool. So with all that done, it was time to start the fretboards, and there's not really much to say here. Standard fretboard. I think the only thing I did here that was a little bit different was I wanted to go with like a binding with the Paduk. I was a little disappointed because I was hoping for a little bit more contrast, but I think it actually looks good in the end. So I radiused the OM to 16 inches, and that's pretty much standard for an acoustic. I figured I'd go with that for now, even though I was actually tempted to go a little bit flatter than that. With the ukulele, I found out that ukuleles traditionally are not radiused, and ukulele makers actually charge extra for radiusing the fretboard. I was actually pretty surprised by that. So ukulele players, you're getting ripped. But I did end up doing a radius on both the fretboards, and I think it's actually really cool. The only thing left to do here is the fret markers or the inlays. I'm not sure what I was going to do, so I basically left it blank for now. If you guys have any ideas, leave a comment down below. So here they are, out of their mold for a little while, just so I can sort of show them. A few things to discuss here. There's a lot of potential tear out when you're working with these thin sides. I am absolutely shocked at how delicate this is, and it's terrifying to think that this is going to be what holds the weight of the strings. It's pretty intense. When you're trying to trim the dimensions on the sides, it's very prone to tearing out, and the wood really just kind of sort of wants to pop. So you have to be really careful when you're working on this stuff. You have to be really delicate. What I ended up using for the neck block and the tail block is rosewood, which is all I really had available. I'm going to try to make this guitar as beautiful on the inside as it is on the outside. I know no one's really going to look in there, but I just think that contrast, the way that looks is just really, really cool. I know the Paduk is going to darken up, but I just think it looks really nice. This was a lot tougher. This was a lot tougher. What I ended up using here was, I used Sapelli for the neck block. I had two pieces that I took off of the neck. I gotta tell you, just getting to this point is one of the most satisfying, things I've ever done in guitar building. It's, it really is an art. There's something very, very delicate. There's something very beautiful about working on this. And look, there's a million flaws in them. There's a million things I could have done better. But it really feels like an accomplishment. It's a lot of fun getting to this point. So if you're thinking about making an acoustic guitar, don't wait. Just do it. Don't put it off. It's completely different than building an electric. I don't think I'd be happy just building one or the other now. I think I will always have an acoustic in process. As expected, it's addictive and it's really satisfying. Now I just hope these things don't explode when I put some strings on them, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, thanks for checking out the entire episode. The next one, I promise, we'll be back out in the wild. We got some really interesting stuff on the next one. We're going to be doing the soundboard. We're going to do the bracing. We got an experiment to run on the next one that I think is going to be really, either really stupid experiment or it's going to be a really cool experiment. I'm not sure which one it's going to be yet. I guess it depends on the result. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys then, or